In the heart of Denver, Colorado, in one of its oldest neighborhoods, there is a park some say is haunted. Ghost stories, by their inherent nature, are really stories about history. So how is it that Cheesman Park came to gain a reputation of being haunted?
William Larimer and his son went out on the prairie, and there was a hill, and they decided that that would be an ideal place to have a cemetery, because people die. You have to have a place to bury them.
His goal was to have a beautiful park-like cemetery like Mount Auburn Cemetery in Boston. Mount Auburn Cemetery, which was built in the 1830s, started a new fashion, a new vogue for cemeteries. Prior to that, cemeteries had been kind of a place to just bury your dead folks, and you don't really hang out there. Mount Auburn, though, had the dead below the surface and a park above. So this was very exciting for a lot of folks, so many cities copied Mount Auburn Cemetery. Unfortunately, William Larimer chose the top of a hill, and although we're not the desert that Stephen Long thought we were when he dubbed us the Great American Desert, we are pretty dry. So everything they planted died, failed as a beautiful park-like cemetery.
Later on, there was a water source supplied, so that the area around where the cemetery was could be developed. All that became the suburbs then, and people started moving there. And then the suburbs started growing because that was already populated, so they needed to spread out further and further and further. Well, now they're getting closer and closer to the cemetery. People are now starting to want to build, and developers are wanting to develop that land. Well, you've got this awful looking place. It's a derelict. It's a boot hill that's back there, and people aren't too sure about the health consequences of it either. So they don't want this in their backyard, especially when they're building mansions.
So in the end, a lot of bodies were still left. So they hired Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern and his crew were being very cavalier with the bodies. He saw this as an opportunity for profit. So the more bodies he could seem to remove, the more money he would make.
He used small caskets, 3 feet 6 inches long, and instructed his 18 employees to distribute the contents of one grave into 2 or 3 boxes. So instead of getting paid $1.90 for one body, he's getting paid $1.90 for that same person 2 or 3 times. So he's making a little extra money there.
So finally it came to a huge expose in the newspaper, the Denver Republican, entitled "The Work of Ghouls." The line of desecrated graves at the southern boundary of the cemetery sickened and horrified everybody by the appearance they presented. Around their edges were piled broken coffins, rent and tattered shrouds, and fragments of clothing that had been torn from the dead bodies. All were trampled into the ground by the footsteps of the gravediggers like rejected junk. A damning, if you will, a very damning moment for Mr. McGovern, and he was fired.
So after that, the city stopped the process completely, and no further bodies were to be dug up by McGovern. The desecration of the bodies by McGovern's men is given as the cause for occasional ghost sightings by residents in homes later built around the old cemetery because of the disrespect of those buried there.
It actually sat for a while. They weren't quite sure what they were going to do. They had run out of money. This scandal had happened. So finally, they decided to remove any signs of the bodies beneath and just leave them there. So they removed all upward signs and left them there. Estimates range from 1 to 3,000 bodies, depending on which historian you read. Mayor Spear was really intent on that, and he came in to his mayorship in 1904. Anyway, as part of his City Beautiful, he wanted to change the ugly remnants into something fine, and so it did become the park. I believe it was 1908, 1910, somewhere right in there, that it opened to the public, but it was still lacking one. They lacked one piece. They lacked the pavilion. And Mayor Spear said, whatever person can pay to build a pavilion may have naming rights. Walter Cheesman was our water baron, and at a time when most cities around the nation charged maybe $12 to $13 a year for water, Cheesman, because he had a monopoly on the water, he was able to gouge people and charge them 3 times as much. So yeah, when he died, his wife and daughter were pretty much the only folks who were sad, and he died in 1907. And his wife paid to have the place built and got the rights to name it. One of the things that happens with bodies is once the coffin rots, soil moves. We don't think of it as moving. It seems very solid to us, but it actually moves. It undulates and works itself. And things that are heavy move down through the soil, and things that are light move up through the soil. So once the restraining coffins rot away, the lighter things, your bones, are going to start moving to the surface. So in the end of 2010, when the government of Denver was doing some work on the sprinkler systems there in Cheesman, they did find 4 bodies near the pavilions, including one fellow who had risen to the point, I'm sure from 6 feet under, but risen to the point where when he was found mere inches below the surface and only a few inches away from a sidewalk, which had been there for years. So if they'd left him, if they hadn't happened to have been digging there, he, within another 4 or 5 years, who knows, would have come up on his own.